Okay, today we study forward interest rates. The interest rates we have studied so far are all spot rates. So a spot rate is an interest rate for a lending and borrowing contract that starts today on the spot. Forward rates, on the other hand, are interest rates for a lending and borrowing contract that start in the future, not today. So let's look at an example. Question. What is the 1 year ahead 2 year long forward interest rate? Which we denote by R sub 1 2. That is the interest rate for the contract that starts in 1 year and is valid for the following 2 years, implied in the following contract. Let's see. Today is 1st of January 2013, and the borrowing happens 1 year from today, 1st of January 2014. The borrowed amount is £0.9. The repayment happens 3 years from now, that is 1st of January 2016, so that the lending and borrowing period is 2 years, and the repaid amount is £1. If you think these two numbers are too small, you can just say £0.9 billion are borrowed and then £1 billion are repaid. So indeed our math doesn't change at all from what we learned in the class of basic calculus of interest rates. Borrowed amount 0.9 times 1 plus unknown interest rate R12 to the power 2 because it is 2 year borrowing, and this should be equal to £1, the amount to be repaid. If you solve it, R sub 1 2 is equal to 5.41%. Again, math is exactly the same. The only difference is that the borrowing doesn't start today. The contract is agreed upon, so this interest rate itself is agreed upon today, so there is no uncertainty about interest rates, but the borrowing starts in the future. Let's get used to some notations. So today all the interest rates have two subscripts, and the first subscript indicates when lending starts, and the second subscript indicates how long the lending lasts. For example, all the spot rates have the first subscript equal to 0, because for these interest rates the lending starts immediately. For 1 year ahead forward rates, the first subscript is always 1 because it starts in 1 year. R sub 1 lasts for 1 year, R sub 1 2 lasts for 2 years. The 2 year ahead forward rates have 2 as the first subscript because the lending starts 2 years from today. And 1 year long forward rates have the second subscript equal to 1. R01 is the annual interest rate for lending that starts today and lasts for 1 year. R31 is the interest rate for lending and borrowing that starts 3 years from today and lasts for 1 year. So there are so many kinds of forward interest rates, but remember, although lending and borrowing for these forward contracts does not start today but in the future, there is no uncertainty about these interest rates because these interest rates are determined and agreed upon today. Next, let's study how spot rates and forward rates are connected. In a previous class we studied spot rates, today we studied forward rates. You might be feeling, oh my gosh, there are so many interest rates. Do we need all this information to understand the interest rate market? Well, actually, spot rate information is in a sense sufficient. As long as you know all the spot rates, forward rates can be theoretically derived. So let's study next how to derive forward rates from the spot rate information. Here is a numerical example. Suppose the spot yield curve information is given as follows. So there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 year interest rates, They are all spot rates, so the lending and borrowing starts today. And these are the notations we introduced in the last slide. And suppose the 1-year interest rate is 2.04% and 2-year annual interest rate is 2.06% and so on, up to the 5-year spot interest rate of 3.06%. Question: what is the implied 2-year ahead, 2-year long interest rate, R22, implied by these spot rates? To answer that question, note that there are at least two ways to invest your money for 4 years. One is to invest your money through the 4-year spot rate contract, to which the interest rate R04 is applied. A second method to invest your money for 4 years is first lend your money by the 2-year spot contract and at the same time enter into a forward contract that will start 2 years from today and lasts for 2 years. For the first 2 years, this spot rate R02 is applied, and then this forward interest rate R22 is applied. These two methods should give exactly the same return. If one is better than the other, then all investors would want to borrow money from the cheaper method and at the same time lend that money at the higher rate, and by doing so investors could take arbitrage, getting free money. So the no-arbitrage argument implies that these two methods should give exactly the same return. Consequently, we have this equation. The left-hand side of the first equation corresponds to the second method. Your money grows at 1 plus the 2-year spot rate to the power 2 times 1 plus 2-year ahead, 2-year long forward interest rate to the power 2. The right-hand side corresponds to the first method. Your money grows at 1 plus the 4-year spot rate to the power 4. We know the 2-year spot rate, that's 0.0206. We know the 4-year spot rate, that's 0.0267. Consequently, if you solve it, we can get the 2-year ahead, 2-year long interest rate R22, and that's equal to 3.28%. So the conclusion is that this 2-year ahead, 2-year long interest rate, the interest rate from 2 years from today to 4 years from today, is implied by two spot rates, the 2-year rate and the 4-year rate. A similar logic can be used to find the implied 3-year ahead, 1-year long interest rate R31. There are two methods to invest money for 4 years. One is again to invest through the 4-year spot contract. Another method is to enter into a 3-year ahead, 1-year long forward contract and at the same time lend the money through the 3-year spot contract. And these two methods should give the same results. The left-hand side corresponds to the second method, 1 plus the 3-year spot rate to the power 3 times 1 plus this 3-year ahead, 1-year long forward rate should be equal to the outcome of investing money through the 4-year spot contract. We know the 3-year spot rate, we know the 4-year spot rate, so the 3-year ahead, 1-year long interest rate R31 turns out equal to 3.33%. Again, the idea behind this computation is the non-arbitrage argument. As today's last topic, let me discuss the relation between the spot rate curve and forward rate curve. In one of the previous classes, we studied how to draw the spot yield curve. And in the previous slide, we studied that as long as we have all spot rates, we can compute all forward rates. So given the same spot rate information, we can compute, for example, all 1-year long forward interest rates. This interest rate starts today and ends in 1 year. This interest rate starts 1 year from today and lasts for 1 year. All these interest rates are 1 year long contract. If we plot these 1 year long forward interest rates, then it is called forward rate curve or forward yield curve. Let me plot these forward rates as a blue line and these 1 year long forward rates as a red line. So in this diagram, the horizontal axis is when the lending ends, 1 year from today, 2 years from today, and so on. And the vertical axis is the annual interest rate. As you can see, when the spot yield curve is upward sloping, the forward rate curve is above the spot yield curve. But as we studied in a previous class, the spot yield curve is not always upward sloping. Sometimes it is inverted, downward sloping. Sometimes it is U-shaped, hump-shaped, or flat. If, for example, the spot rate curve is hump-shaped, as is represented by this blue line, then the corresponding 1 year long forward rate curve should look like this. Again, the point is that as long as you know all the spot rates, as long as you have the spot rate curve, you can compute all forward rates, especially 1 year long forward rates, and you draw it and you get forward rate curve. To understand the theoretical relation between the spot rate curve and forward rate curve, it is useful to know that the n-year spot rate is just the geometric average of 1 year long forward rates. For example, lending your money through the 4 year long spot rate contract should be equivalent to lending your money through the sequence of 1 year long forward contracts. Again, this is a no-arbitrage argument, and because of that, 1 plus 4 year long spot rate to the power 4 years should be equal to 1 plus R01 times 1 plus R11 times 1 plus R21 times 1 plus R31. If you take the fourth root of both hands, you'll see that the 4 year long spot rate is the geometric average of these 4 forward rates. Same thing can be said about the 5 year long spot rate. That is the geometric average of these 5 1 year long forward rates. If you compare these two equations, the only difference is that the second equation has an extra term, which is the 4 year ahead 1 year long forward rate. And in this sense, the spot rate is the average value, while the forward rate is the marginal value. And I think you know the relation between the average value and the marginal value. When we studied the first year microeconomics, we studied the relation between the marginal cost MC and the average cost AC. That is, when the marginal cost is below the average cost is decreasing, and when the marginal cost is above the average cost is increasing. This relation between the marginal value and the average value is, of course, a general fact. Imagine that there are 30 students in this classroom and we all take an exam and the average score is 50. Now suppose there is another student coming to the classroom and he takes the exam and the average score goes up from 50 to 50.2. This means what? The score of this marginal student was actually above the average 50. That's why the average increased. In contrast, if the average goes down from 50 to 49.8, that means that the score, the mark of this marginal student was actually below the average 50. That's why the average decreased. Okay? So when the marginal value is above the average goes up, and when the marginal value is below the average goes down. By that logic, the spot yield curve is increasing if and only if the forward yield curve is above the spot yield curve, because spot rate is the average value and the forward rate is the marginal value.